The town of Willow Creek was never the same after the night the stars went out. It started with just a few dimmer constellations, but within a week the entire sky was as black as coal. People whispered about the end times, about some ancient prophecy being fulfilled. But Mason Ellis knew better. He knew it was just the beginning. Mason lived on the outskirts of town, in a small house with a wraparound porch and a view of the forest. He was a quiet man, a widower who kept to himself, and the townsfolk left him be. But Mason wasn't lonely. He had his books, his whiskey, and his window. The window was an antique, a massive pane of glass that took up most of the west wall of his living room. Mason would sit in his favorite armchair, staring out into the darkness, feeling the weight of the universe. He'd always been drawn to the mysterious, the unknown, and the stars had been his gateway to the infinite. Now, with the sky as black as his mood, Mason felt lost. But then, one night he saw her, a figure, standing just beyond the trees, her face a pale oval in the darkness. Mason's heart quickened as he rose from his chair, his eyes fixed on the window. She didn't move, didn't seem to breathe, but he felt her presence like a hum in the air. Mason's fingers brushed against the cold glass as he leaned in, his nose almost touching the pane. The woman's face was a whisper away, her features indistinct, yet he sensed a deep sadness in her eyes. He felt an inexplicable connection to her, as if she was a reflection of his own sorrow. As the night wore on, Mason found himself returning to the window again and again, hoping to catch another glimpse of the mysterious figure. But she vanished, leaving behind only the darkness and the oppressive silence of the starless sky. Days passed, and Mason's routine continued, rising with the sun, tending to his garden, and disappearing into his books. But his mind wandered back to the woman. Her presence lingered, a haunting melody that echoed through his dreams. One evening, as he sat in his armchair, lost in thought, Mason noticed a subtle change in the darkness. A faint, eerie glow clung to the trees, like mist that refused to dissipate. The air vibrated with an otherworldly energy, and Mason's skin prickled with gooseflesh. Suddenly, the woman reappeared, closer this time, her face pressed against the glass. Mason's heart stuttered as their eyes met, and he felt the room shrink, the air constricting around him. A single word, whispered on the wind, carried on the darkness. "Mason!" The sound was a gentle breeze that rustled the leaves, yet it sent shivers down Mason's spine. The woman's face was inches from his own, her eyes black as the void, yet radiating an unearthly light. Mason's breath fogged the glass as he stared, transfixed, his heart pounding in his chest. The woman's gaze seemed to hold a deep longing, a yearning that resonated within Mason's own soul. He felt the weight of her sorrow, a burden that threatened to crush him. In that instant, Mason knew he had to reach out, to bridge the gap between their worlds. His hand, trembling, rose to touch the glass. The woman's eyes, unblinking, held his, as if waiting for him to make the connection. Mason's fingers made contact with the pane, and a jolt of electricity ran through him, like the spark of a dying star. The room around him began to blur, colors bleeding into darkness. As the woman's face drew closer, her lips inches from the glass, Mason felt the glassy surface vibrate, as if the very fabric of reality was about to tear apart. A sigh, like the whispers of the damned, escaped her lips. The words, when they came, were a gentle breeze that sent shivers down Mason's spine. "Find me!" The world around Mason seemed to unravel, threads of reality snapping like brittle twine. The woman's face vanished, leaving behind only the dark and the echo of her words. Mason stumbled backward, his chair scraping against the floor, as the room seemed to reel around him. The darkness outside appeared to seep into the house, tendrils of shadow creeping up the walls, as if the night itself was trying to claim him. He stood, his legs unsteady, and took a step back, his eyes fixed on the window. The glass, once a barrier between the worlds, now seemed fragile, a thin membrane separating him from the unknown. "Find me." The words still echoed in his mind, a siren's call that resonated deep within his soul. Mason felt an overwhelming urge to comply, to abandon the safety of his home and venture into the darkness. He turned, his eyes scanning the room, as if searching for a clue, a sign that would lead him to the mysterious woman. His gaze fell upon his bookshelf, the spines of the tomes seeming to blur together, as if the words themselves were shifting, rearranging to reveal a hidden message. Without thinking, Mason reached out and pulled a book from the shelf. The cover, worn and cracked, read Elysium's Gate. He opened the book, the pages yellowed and fragrant with age, as he searched for a passage, a phrase, anything that would guide him. As he read, the words on the page began to shift, rearranging themselves to spell out a message, a single sentence that made his heart race. Beyond the edge of town, where the creek flows into darkness, seek the Bridge of Whispers. Mason's heart pounded in his chest as he felt the darkness outside drawing closer, the shadows deepening, like a doorway opening to the unknown. He knew, in that instant, that he would have to follow the mysterious woman's call, to venture into the heart of the darkness and find what lay beyond. The clock on the mantel ticked away, its rhythmic beat echoing through the silent room, as Mason stood, frozen, the book still clutched in his hand. The words on the page seemed to burn themselves into his mind, the message echoing through his thoughts like a mantra. Beyond the edge of town, where the creek flows into darkness, seek the Bridge of Whispers. He felt an inexplicable pull, a siren's call that urged him to abandon the safety of his home and venture into the unknown. The darkness outside seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy, as if the very fabric of reality was bending to accommodate his journey. Without thinking, Mason turned, his footsteps echoing through the silent house as he made his way to the front door. The night air enveloped him, cool and damp, as he stepped out into the darkness. The town of Willow Creek lay before him, its streets empty and silent, like a deserted stage set. Mason's boots crunched on the gravel as he walked, the only sound in the stillness. He followed the creek, its gentle gurgling growing louder as he walked, until the trees thickened and the water flowed into the darkness. The air grew colder, the shadows deepening, as Mason approached the edge of town. And then, suddenly, he saw it. A bridge, its wooden slats weathered to a silvery gray, stretching across the creek into the heart of the darkness. The Bridge of Whispers. Mason's heart raced, his senses on high alert, as he stepped onto the creaking boards. The silence was almost palpable, as if the very trees were holding their breath, waiting to see what lay on the other side. He took a deep breath, the cool air filling his lungs, as he began to cross the bridge, his footsteps echoing through the darkness. The bridge creaked beneath his feet, the wooden slats groaning as if in protest of his presence. Mason walked, his heart pounding in his chest, his eyes fixed on the darkness beyond the bridge. The air was heavy with an otherworldly energy, the silence thickening like a fog that clung to his skin. As he reached the midpoint of the bridge, Mason heard the first whisper. It was a soft, raspy voice, a gentle susurration that seemed to come from all around him. The words were indistinct, but the tone was unmistakable, a longing, a yearning that spoke directly to Mason's soul. He took another step, and another. As the whispers grew louder, the voices weaving together into a haunting melody. The words began to take shape, phrases echoing through the darkness. Find me? Come closer. Follow the creek. Mason's heart raced, his skin crawling with gooseflesh as he quickened his pace. The bridge creaked and groaned beneath his feet, as if the very fabric of reality was bending to accommodate his journey. And then, suddenly, he was on the other side, the darkness pressing in around him like a physical presence. Mason looked around, his eyes straining to see through the gloom. But there was nothing, only the whispers, growing louder, more urgent. He followed the creek, the water's gentle gurgling guiding him deeper into the darkness. The whispers grew louder still, the voices merging into a single, urgent command. Follow the light. Ahead, a flickering glow appeared, a warm, golden light that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. Mason's heart leapt as he quickened his pace, his footsteps echoing through the darkness.